Hi everybody, and thanks a million for tuning in today. I'm so delighted to be joined again another video with Dr. Alweena Awan. So Alweena is also a fellow dyslexic, which is great to link in with other people with similar viewpoints on things, and also an educational consultant. So we've teamed up today for Dyslexia Awareness Week 2020, all about kind of generally creating awareness for people with learning differences and how we can move that forward. So Alweena, thanks a million for joining us.
Hello. Yeah, delighted to join you. I wanted to just take some time to talk about awareness of the self rather than a general awareness for everybody else. But I hope as I'm talking about that awareness of the self, other people get a different viewpoint. And my viewpoint is that it's a little bit like, well, one of the things about dyslexia is that we do know that the brain is hardwired in a different way. And I found from experience with working with other dyslexics is that sometimes we just try and keep doing the opposite of what we're really good at. So we try and keep fitting into the world that is not conducive to the way that we learn. So it's a little bit like being born an orange and wanting to be an apple. You know, the apple can make a great apple pie and apple crumble, but it can't make that refreshing juice that an orange can make. It can make a juice, but it's not as refreshing as an orange. So I want people to, those that are dyslexic or have, say, dyslexic children, to start really looking at the strengths of what they are capable of. And knowing that because this brain is hardwired in a different way, no matter what you do, you're not going to change the hard wiring, but you might be able to get strategies and different things to help that. So learn how to really accept yourself, look at your strengths, and then try and get support for the things that you kind of need help with. Because basically, the two brains are wired very differently. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because the way the education system is set up, whether it's a school or whether it's a university system or a college, it's set up for the left brain way of thinking, which is all about the logical, the sequencing, the rational thinking, the thinking from small bits building up to a big picture. Yeah. The focus on the reading and the writing skills and the phonics. If you think about how we learn how to read, it's all about phonics. And it's about seeing the small parts first and then seeing the whole, processing deductively rather than inductively. And I'll talk a little about the difference about that. In deductively, you start with the little things and then you arrive at a logical conclusion, whereas inductively you arrive at the conclusion almost like in an instant, but then having to actually explain how you got there is really difficult. So in maths, for instance, when you're taking a maths exam, you get marks for the process that you showed of how you arrived at the answer, even if you get the wrong answer. Whereas if you're a dyslexic, you just get the answer. And then you have to start working backwards to work out got the answer. So you see the examination system, the school system does not support a right brain dyslexic thinker. It supports a left brain dyslexic thinker. Now, a lot of dyslexics try and stay in that box of that education system and try and follow that. And yes, there's certain things we have to do. We have to obviously learn how to read and write. But nowadays, there's so much support that we really need to start looking at what we're really good at doing and utilizing that support. So if we look at the other end, which is the right brain dyslexic way of thinking, dyslexics tend to think outside the box. They're creative, they can explore other ideas. And right now, if I tell you of some of the great dyslexics, you will see that these dyslexics were leaders and innovators and artists. So we've got Henry Ford, Edison, Da Vinci, George
Richard
Bush,
Branson, all of the modern, yeah.
Picasso, Jobs, Alexander Bell, all of these, because you have to think outside the box, or you have to, as a leader, have this great capacity to look from above at the whole scenario. So we need to start thinking of that and starting to really utilize what you're good at.
Yeah, so it's so interesting with the box analogy, because basically the education system as a whole, kind of globally, not even depending upon nations, is you're in a box. So there's a set curriculum, there's a set thing to be done, there's set exams, and a year on year, it's the exact same stuff being taught pretty much in the same format. And you mentioned, Alweena, that like that's kind of a rigid enough approach. Any suggestions that you would have to help try and change bits of the education system? I know you conduct a program on your Simple Literacy site. So anything that you think could be done to help change that?
Well, I think actually right now, in the way that it's not working for a lot more people, not just dyslexics.
Yeah.
I think just left brain people now, children, that it's just finding it difficult. And the education system has been going since like over 100 years old. I think the change is going to come internally, because you're going to find more and more children are actually failing. Because actually, say when I started, I was a teacher at one point. So when I was teaching, say 20 years ago, we had a more leeway for more holistic education. And somehow it's got narrower and the boxes got smaller and smaller. And now it's got to go the other way. So I think it's coming through slowly now, because there's so many children are failing. So yeah, I think it's going to have to come through.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a big one. And obviously you're in the UK education system, and we have the Irish system over here, but definitely I suppose there's massive need for development and change for all people. And as you mentioned, a really interesting point, it's not just people with learning differences, it's generally those conventional, or whatever way you want to call those, very stereotypical children that really excelled in an educational format, generally now are coming up as somewhat not excelling as much and having struggles and challenges that they wouldn't have seen before in the system. So there's definitely a new, possibly linking in with a holistic approach that is needed for teenagers and for kids to get through that educational path.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that has impacted children generally, but dyslexic children, is if one of the ways of the right brain thinking is that it finds sequencing really hard. It finds that logical system really hard. But through physical literacy, you can start to build that in within your own body. So you kind of doing gross motor sequencing, and that can actually help. But again, the education system has moved away, not just from the creative arts, but actually from all the physical literacy and the PE and all of that. So it's an imbalanced curriculum right now, favoring one type of brain, favoring the apples.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting that you mentioned I suppose the sequencing and those type of things. So Alweena and I created a video. It's also on our social media platforms, and probably around a few months ago now, that looks at more of how we integrate those sequencing and how we help move that forward. So feel free to also check that out for other tips and tricks that could possibly help children and help adults move towards their ideal goal.
Yeah, the thing is, the dyslexic brain is not very good at abstract concepts or thinking. It needs concrete. The abstract, the numbers and the letters are that box, the left brain. So for the dyslexic children and even adults, they need a lot of stuff concretely, so that then they can access that part, the abstract. So through the physical literacy, through sequencing, through all of that, you can start to build that in. And the other thing is that more for adult dyslexic is organizational skills, because the brain kind of works in a multi-dimensional way for a dyslexic. It looks at the bigger picture and then it starts picking up the little parts. But sometimes in terms of any organization, whether it's a project or even organizing your computer files, for example, it just seems like an overwhelm. It's like the brain is thinking from all these different angles, and you need to get a thread of where you start. So here you must try, and I think one of the great strategies that I've used that has really helped me do lots of things, including my own PhD, is starting to look at my strength, but then also starting to look at what I'm not brilliant at, and then getting support with that. So if I can give you an example, is my computer files were all over the place. They were saved in cloud, they were saved in Dropbox, they were saved on the phone, and I really couldn't, and they were saved on my AOL, my email. And it was somebody with a left brain approach that just created some folders for me and said, listen, do it by date. Here are the folders, and now just put them in. And I remember looking at these folders thinking, why didn't I think of that? Mm-hmm. But that's not how my brain works. So then it was so easy. So even in terms of, say, getting your flat organized or getting your house organized, watch a few programs of where people who are really good at organizing, you look at that and you think, wow, why didn't I think of that? Now I get it, I can do it. So that's, start building up strategies of helping yourself, but still celebrating what you're good at. So you can partner up with people, or you can, if you're not brilliant at writing, why try and keep going down that route? There's loads of apps now. You can speak and it does all the spelling and the writing for you. Use the apps. There's things like Grammarly that do all the spelling changes for you. So try and build in support structures to what you're not brilliant at, but still focus on what you're good at and keep celebrating what you're good at. Don't try and become Apple.
Yeah, from a confidence perspective and a health perspective, so vital. I remember when we spoke probably last year and I said to you about my handwriting and you were like, sure, why do you need to write that much? And I was like, didn't even think of it that way. Why don't I just type it? And obviously I'm past the education system now, so I don't have to do all of the handwriting. But again, it was something that I wanted to improve in, but something that just wasn't ever getting any traction. The words were still deteriorating in eligibility as I progressed through the page, So it was just so there is that want and that drive in dyslexics and in everybody in general to, these are things that I'm not as good as everybody else. So I'll just work loads on them to try and get them better. But there's always give and take, I think you can do bits of that, definitely, but you still only get to a certain threshold that generally you mightn't be, well, I have found anyway, you mightn't be as happy as to how you can get on in that. So as you're saying, it's other strategies. Why do you need to do those things when there's other ways now of doing it with assistive technology? There's other resources that help that person achieve what they want to achieve, but just in an easier way.
Yeah, and it's just using the support rather than keep. It's like trying to draw blood out of a stone constantly. But yeah, we need to do a certain amount. So if it's a child you're trying to help with and they have a project, then what you do is you just give them the structure of how they're going to do it, and then let them go, because now they feel scaffolded. And I'm thinking of writing a book and I have all these ideas, but they're everywhere. So I found somebody whose mind is very structured, And he said, right, this, and suddenly it falls into place. So it's just getting the support really. And the awareness really has to come from the self in terms of, I'm good at this. This is what I'm focusing on. It has to come from the parent if it's your child. Listen, you're good at this. I'm going to help you with this other stuff, or I'm going to find a way of, supporting that. But you just focus on what you're good at.
Yeah, really, really important. Such a fabulous way to wrap up our conversation. People focusing on what they're good at, recognizing obviously what they're not good at, and hopefully working on them. But the most important thing, we're all given such a valuable skill set that, why try go against that? If you those skills and assets, to utilize them and progress them and move them forward. Alweena, thanks so much for joining us today. It's so great to have your insights. We'll attach some of Alweena's websites for people to check out if they want to learn more about her programs and processes for schools and for home learning. And we'll also take any questions. If people have any comments that they'd like to share, they can email them in directly or message us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.